Hello, Isaac.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Am I audible, clearly audible to you, or is my voice still low?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. And I assume you should be able to see my screen as well, that is sharing the presentation slide deck.
I can, yes.
Awesome. All the best for your presentation.
Oh, thank you. I do have a quick question for you too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will we have control to advance our slides, or are you going to
No,
do that?
no, you wouldn't, but while you're presenting, make sure that you give me cues like next, advance, or proceed, and I should be able to do that. So that's the reason we asked the presenters to plan for 10 minutes, so that the additional 2 minutes that are there, that can go in the logistics if at all. But if not, you can keep talking for the entire 12 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. I will also mention all the guidelines and rules before we start presenting today. So you should be having everything before before you start your talk.
Okay, perfect.
Isaac, you want to double check your slides if they are okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll go a little slower. All right. Does that look good?
I think there's, if you can go back to my second slide really quick, looks like the format on something might have changed. Sorry, I've got a lot of animations in here. I should have taken those out. Yeah, so right
This one?
here. Yeah,
Okay.
that next box that pops up with those letters should have a background on it that covers up what's behind it.
Okay. Uh, Let me check what I can do. Do you have a color? Because I'm just gonna add a color to it.
As if it's gray or something, that's fine.
Okay. I added blue if that's okay.
That works. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So is that
That
okay now?
yeah, that looks great. Thank you.
Awesome. We're just waiting on other participants and judges to join the session. We should be starting about at the hour at 11 a.m. So I'll wait for some more people to trickle in.
I've just been notified that there might be something wrong with the Zoom link for this session on the GSG website.
For this session, I'm not sure. It was working for other participants, and we do have guests joining this session, so I think it should be working. Uh, uh, may I know where did you get this information from so that I can track it back?
Yeah, my advisor's in the next room, and he said he's having trouble getting into the meeting using the link that's on the GSG website.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sending, when you click on session 4, the yellow box, it's sending us to a Google Doc and not to a Zoom. So,
Okay, let me just double check. Could you join the session 1 Zoom link? That should take you to the same room.
yeah, if I can get the Zoom link, that'd be great.
Right. I will get that sorted. But you can definitely join session 1 and it will take you to get you to the same room. All right, I think we have all the participants and the judges here. So we will get started. Um, I would like to thank all of you for coming out and taking part in this year's Graduate Research Colloquium. My name is Sarvada Chipkar and I will be your moderator today. Just a couple of ground rules before we get started. Each contestant will have about 12 minutes to present. Your time will start the second you start speaking. I will give you a 1 minute warning by interrupting your talk over the Zoom. Once you are ready to present, give me a verbal cue like start, and I will advance through your slide deck. During the presentation, give me a verbal cue like next, advance, or proceed to advance to the next slide or animation. I will be introducing you before the talk so you can jump directly into your presentation to save on time. At the end of the presentation, judges can unmute themselves and ask questions to the participants for about 5 minutes. While the judges are scoring, I will moderate questions from the general audience. I ask the audience to stay muted during the presentation and drop their questions in the chat box during or after the presentation. So, with that, I will introduce our first speaker. Uh, our first speaker is Bharat Kevar, Kevritana. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. The topic of his presentation is Learning with the Word Game, Effects of Crossword and Elaboration on Learning Scientific Vocabulary. Bharat, whenever you're ready, just let me know and I'll start the timer.
All right, thank you. And good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about my study, which involves using crossword to improve learning of scientific theory. So let me start off by giving you a quick history of a crossword. A crossword, most cited as the first crossword, was invented in 1913 by Arthur Wing because many of its features share similarity with those found in crosswords nowadays that we are familiar with. But not until 1925 that a crossword was implemented in schools to support learning of scientific terms. Ever since then, there have been large number of studies in implementing crossword effectiveness. What we have learned so far from those studies. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, thank you. What we have learned so far from those studies are that most of the time people use crossword hints to search their memory for already known words. Meaning for them to be able to solve a crossword, they have to have knowledge about those crosswords and the words prior to doing it. So crossword is useful as a review tool of words that you have already learned from somewhere else. But then the question becomes, when crossword is used to introduce new words for the first time, does it make you learn those words better or not? Next. Next slide. Yep. Okay. I have mentioned that many studies try to validate crossword effectiveness, but the majority of them only measure perceived usefulness. That is, they report students think or believe that crossword help them learn better, but not reporting objective learning performance, such as improvement in test score. There are some studies that did measure and report learning performance, but not all of them incorporate proper experimental control condition. So in the end, there are only a few that use proper control and measure objective data. So besides Crossman study, the other 4 listed here met all those conditions and found positive results, while the other 3 not listed here also met the condition but found no improvement. So this suggests that crossword is not a foolproof solution, and that's why there are still researchers, me included, who look into this learning tool. Next slide. So still there is an explanation for the large number of studies that report positive findings. Crossword generally involves pair association between words and their definitions, or sometimes related facts. So if they test long-term memory of those words by presenting their definition of facts and then test the word or vice versa, the positive findings make sense. But in my study, I want to go beyond learning pair, associate, and facts. So like higher level concepts and practical application of those words or the knowledge of those words. So however, in that case, crossword may not be the right tool for the task anymore. So next slide. So if crossword alone may not be a right tool for it, then what I can do here, I can introduce elaboration, because from the literature, elaboration is known to improve learning by having students involved in deep level processing of the information that they are learning, which would result in durable memory retention too. Next slide. And the other thing aside elaboration is a constructive learning. So instead of giving them feeding students elaborative information, by having them construct those information themselves or think about it themselves, it tends to stick in their memory for longer. So in the end, I want to have all of them sum up together, like constructive and elaboration, all of them add to the crossword, should result in better crossword, which hopefully would improve its effect for learning tool, as a learning tool. Next, please. All right, so in my study, I want to make sure that I follow the previous, right, what they did right. So I want to make sure that I incorporate a proper experimental control condition. For all conditions, I want to control for time on task, and for realistic settings, I want to do the delay testing, because we're not learning a word today and test it tomorrow. For the word, my hypothesis is that the word game with elaboration tasks add to it should result in higher learning performance than word game alone. Next, please. All right, so my participant would be coming from introductory psychology students. We run 2 experiments here. The first one involved 14 and the second involved 30 people. Design is within subjects, and we have 2 conditions here, although the condition that we really care for is the condition 1, which is the word game and word game with elaboration. The second variable, the order, is there to basically counterbalance it. So it shouldn't matter whether participants do the word game with elaboration first or later. Next, please. All right, so because word game and elaboration means that they would do two tasks, right? So the word game only, or basically they do just the crossword. To make up for the time difference, I have them do crossword twice. And the example of the elaboration task is as shown here. So if they were given a word hippocampus, I asked them to basically generate the connection with three other terms that they might know or they might learn from that crossword sheet. So if hippocampus can be related to these trees as shown here. Next, please. So, and the only difference between two experiments is that the first one, participant already seen the words that was presented in crossword, but they've seen it before in the class. Experiment B, that's not the case. They would see the word, the crossword words for the first time. Yep, next please. And then we test them 5 days later after we have them do the crossword thing. And we test them by giving them 6 free response questions. Basically, we ask them what the term is, and then to match the nature of elaboration task, we ask them again to generate the connections with 2 other terms and concepts. And then we have them answer some application question. And next, please. And then we also have 30 multiple choice questions to follow that too. Basically, kind of like a recognition test. And the next slide would be basically the mapping of what I just said. There are 3 puzzles for participants. One of them they would do crossword twice. One of them they would do crossword once, and the elaboration task. And the one that fall into under C, they would not be seeing that crossword at all. So basically, they're actually doing 2 crossword out of 3. After 5 days delay, they will test 36 items. And next, please. So, so going against my hypothesis, however, I found that doing crossword with elaboration tasks result in test score that is not statistically higher than doing crossword alone. Results are the same for both recognition and recall. And it does not matter whether crosswords are used as a review tool or self-learning tool for learning new words. And you can see here, next please. And yep, again, the result doesn't matter whether you do it as a recall or recognition. And next, please. It also doesn't matter whether it's the participants see the word first time or the later time. So like whether crossword is used as a review tool or self-learning tool, it doesn't matter. Next, please. And yep, I just mentioned that. And next, please. So basically, I lump all 4 graphs together. So you can see here that the trend lines share similar patterns for 3 or 4 out of 4 graphs here. Next, please. So what I've learned from conducting this study is that compared to not doing crossword at all, doing it helps you learn and remember scientific terms. And whether you use it as a review tool or self-learning tool, and it works both ways. However, adding elaboration does not make crossword any better. And that doesn't make sense to me because considering that there's a literature on elaboration that suggests that improve learning. Next, please. So why might not the elaboration not work in my study? But there are 2 things to consider, right? One, the design of an elaboration test has to match the design of, the design of evaluation test has to match the design of elaboration tasks, which I did in this study. And 2, elaboration tasks must correspond with desired learning goal, which in this case is to gain higher level knowledge beyond term definition pair association. And next, please. That could be the problem. That second one, the nature of elaboration tasks is not appropriate here. So maybe that's why it doesn't work. And we are thinking of redesigning the elaboration task and run the study again and see what's going on there. And that concludes my study. And next slide. Yeah. So thank you very much for your attention. So I'm open for any questions now.
Thanks, Varad. That was well within time. I would now request judges to unmute themselves and ask questions to the presenter. Dr. Bar, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So interesting work. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on the difference between constructive learning and active learning.
Right. So from the mac and cheese paper that I read and basically other papers that involve the same concept, active learnings mean that they are like actively participating in the, say, reading materials that they are reading on. But basically whatever material is presented to them, they learn that material and nothing beyond that. Constructive learning is that when they think about, so like, for example, if you were giving a list of words, right? And then you basically read the word by like pay attention to it, maybe follow your finger and read on it, or maybe even highlight it, right? That is considered active learning. The material is there and you just learn as is, as opposed to constructive learning, whereas the same list of words, but then the learner can basically start writing up something, like write notes or doing something, generate something beyond what the list is already there. So that's considered constructive learning.
Hi, Pom. Good job. I was wondering if you could reiterate what exactly you had participants do for the elaboration and how you checked to ensure that they really put enough effort into that elaboration task to ensure that you kind of had the manipulation that you were going for.
Right. So in my plan is basically, well, in my task, can you go back to slide, like, I don't remember what slide it is. Keep going, please. A little bit more. Yep, that one. Thank you. So the other one. So, well, basically what I have them do is, let's say that the crossword have 15 words, right? And then they have to learn each word from those crossword sheet. And maybe they see one word, say hippocampus, for example. And for each word in that presented in the crossword, participants have to come up with 3 other words that they think it's connected somehow. And then they have to like basically tell me by like giving me a writing, a short writing saying how those pair are related. So maybe hippocampus is related to long-term memory, for example, and then they would basically say hippocampus related to long-term memory, how, and then the other 2 words that they come up with, and then say how. So that would be the task that they did during the experimental phase. And in the testing phase, I have them basically do it again by giving them, this time I'm giving them a word and say, okay, this word, they should have seen it in the crossword already. And then they have to give me basically they do it again. They give me the task, they give me a generate the words again, and then they give me like explanation how those words are paired up. And basically how I graded it is I check for like the accuracy, whether the explanation that they give me would make sense or not. And basically I have like a scoring scheme to grade each of them so that they are all graded in the same manner.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions from the judges? We still have 1 more minute.
Well, I guess a follow-up question, and kind of the reason why I just asked to get a better understanding of the elaboration task is that I understand the importance of controlling for time. Obviously, the elaboration task is going to take more time than just doing the crossword alone. But in the crossword alone condition, you're having them do the crossword twice. So presumably in that condition, they are getting a bit of reinforcement on that definition itself. Whereas in the elaboration task, they're really only doing the crossword once, and then they're doing their own kind of generation of information. So do you think that is maybe something like that you would want to control for as well? Like, I know you can't have it both ways, but I'm just wondering what you think about that.
I'm actually thinking that like you're totally right, because we're expecting that there's like a reinforcement effect that would improve their memory on the words, right? But we also hope that elaboration would do even better than that. And the reason we think that because in our test, we don't just test the basically terms and definition. We ask them to write up some application of the word. There's 6 questions for that. And technically, I mean, theoretically, people who just do crossword alone wouldn't have experience in generating application term for the terms that they learn, right? So they should be inferior on that. And maybe they are like some participants, but for like the overall score, it turns out that they're not doing better.
Got it. Thank you.
So at this point, I would like the judges to take some time to score the contestants, and I'll utilize this time to take questions up from the audience. If they have any, feel free to drop them in the chat box. Or if you would like, you can also unmute yourself and ask the questions. I have a question for you, Pom. So
Yep.
what was the spectrum of the participants who participated in this crossword experiment of yours? Was there any age limit on who the participants were?
We didn't have the age limit. Well, at least not the top. We have the floor, so that they have to be beyond 18s. But basically we are taking students from the introductory site pool at that moment. So it could be any student who enroll in that class. So I would assume that they have like age from like 18 to 20s or something like that. But we didn't set the age requirement. So
Okay.
not for gender requirement either.
Mm-hmm. So was there any different result on the basis of gender, or did you not look into that aspect of the experiment at
Yeah.
all?
No, we didn't look into that.
Okay.
I guess we could like later on.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to know that too, huh?
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right. Whenever the judges are done scoring, we can proceed to the next speaker. Let me know whenever you're ready.
I'm done. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Barr.
So in the meantime, I would like to thank you again for everyone who listened. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I know you have to leave a little early, so feel free to drop out of the call whenever. I know you have some other appointments. So.
Right, I do.
Yep.
So I'll be taking my leave then. Bye-bye.
Sure.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Good luck for the other twos.
Dr. Smith, are you done? Can we proceed to the next presentation?
I'm on the last two, so feel free to go ahead.
All, thank you. So let me introduce the next speaker to you. His name is Isaac Vedic, and he's from the Department of Kinesiology and Integrative Physiology at Michigan Tech. His title of research is Exercise is Medicine, Promoting Physical Activity During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Isaac, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Good morning, and thank you for the introduction. So today I'm going to be presenting an ongoing project that is currently being conducted by myself, as well as a team of graduate students in the Kinesiology and Integrative Physiology department, with the purpose of promoting the use of physical activity as a form of medicine during the COVID-19 pandemic. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So since the onset of the pandemic, data suggests that the average time that we spend engaging in physical activity has declined by about 33%. And the amount of time that we spend sitting has increased by about 28%. And you can go ahead and advance to the next. And this is a major concern because physical inactivity, or a lack of physical activity, is the fourth leading risk factor for premature death, contributing to over 3 million deaths per year. And you can advance next. Additionally, we know that physical inactivity increases the risk for a number of diseases, including cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. Next slide, please. Looking at data on COVID-19 hospitalizations, ICU visits, and deaths, it's been made increasingly apparent that underlying health conditions play a major role in the severity of the disease in those who become infected. The data presented in this graph comes from the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report and represents the percentage of individuals who have been hospitalized with an underlying health condition. And as you can see here, almost 90% have had some underlying condition, and the highest prevalences belong to the diseases that I just mentioned in the last slide that can not only be prevented with regular physical activity and exercise, but also treated. So you can hit next twice here. A few relatively recent papers, like this one from Hammer et al., have identified physical inactivity itself as a direct risk factor for COVID-19 hospitalization. And another paper, you can advance, by Bronner et al., found a significant inverse relationship between individuals' cardiorespiratory fitness and hospitalization, showing that generally the fitter an individual, the lower their risk of severe COVID-19 outcomes. You can go to the next slide, please. So it's well established that regular physical activity is a powerful form of medicine. It can prevent and treat many diseases, bolster immune function, decrease inflammation, help to manage body weight, and may even potentially increase resilience to COVID-19, meaning that it may help to reduce the severity of the disease and potentially even lead to faster and fuller recoveries. You can hit next. As of today, to my knowledge, there have been over 30 commentaries published in peer-reviewed journals addressing concerns about the declining levels of physical activity and emphasizing the importance of using physical activity, especially right now, to improve health. Additionally, leading a physically active and healthy lifestyle during the pandemic has been promoted by 5 major health organizations. Thus, it's imperative that we use physical activity to improve COVID-19 resilience. You can go ahead and hit next a couple times here. Help to manage the burden on the healthcare system, help to prevent any future health crisis that could arise from declining physical activity levels. And in accordance with multiple calls to action from organizations such as the American College of Sports Medicine, we need to act immediately to promote and facilitate physical activity in the public. Next slide, please. So the purpose of our project is to promote and facilitate physical activity in our own community across the Upper Peninsula. So in rural communities such as ours, there are many unique obstacles to engaging in physical activity, especially during the pandemic. First, the message to stay active hasn't been adequately communicated. Second, access to infrastructure that promotes physical activity is very limited. So this includes gyms and recreational facilities. And third, engaging in physical activity from home may be problematic for those who need more guidance. So in order to overcome some of these barriers, we have 3 project aims. The first is to assess current levels of physical activity in our area. The second is to increase public awareness about the importance of staying physically active during the pandemic. And the third is to help facilitate physical activity by providing a free community-based physical activity program. Next slide. To assess current levels of activity in our community, we set up a home website called upandmoving.org. And on that website, we have a link for individuals to fill out a web-based survey that will assess their physical activity levels using a well-validated self-report survey called the International Physical Activity Questionnaire, or IPAC. You can go ahead and hit next, I think twice here. In the survey, we also asked individuals how they think COVID-19 has impacted their physical activity subjectively. So once individuals fill out the baseline survey through our website, we send them the same survey to retake 12 weeks later, and we'll evaluate the differences between the baseline and the follow-up surveys to see if our intervention is having an effect. Next slide, please. In order to increase public awareness about the importance of being physically active, and to also provide evidence-based resources and recommendations to the public, we plan to utilize a wide variety of different platforms, including local radio ads and interviews, television commercials and segments, also through social media using our Up and Moving Facebook page, through our Up and Moving website, and lastly, through peer-reviewed publication and also publication on national science blogs. Next slide, please. So to facilitate home-based physical activity in the community, we started a free virtual exercise program called Up and Moving. And the program consists of both live and recorded exercise sessions that are led by graduate students in our department. The program offers a wide range of different exercise types, from strength training to yoga, and are provided 6 days a week. Individuals can follow along live on Zoom or Facebook, or they can also watch the recorded versions of these workouts, which are posted to our website. And we've also been delivering workouts twice a month on local television through ABC 10. Next slide, please. So far, we've had 43 individuals complete our baseline survey. And as you can see here by the demographics, we've had a wide range of individuals complete the survey so far, ages ranging from 18 all the way up to 69 years old, including both Michigan Tech students as well as non-students. Next slide, please. For the individuals that have completed the survey, the average self-reported amount of time spent engaging in physical activity was 512 minutes per week, but you can see that there's quite a bit of variability with a standard deviation of 442 minutes. Next slide, please. Looking at some of the responses on how COVID-19 has affected people's activity level, 65% reported that they were less active during the pandemic. 45% reported that they spent less time going to the gym or participating in group exercise. 65% indicated that they will increase their physical activity when the pandemic ends. And only 50% indicated that they have been encouraged to exercise by public officials. Next slide, please. So in an effort to communicate the importance of staying physically active, particularly during the pandemic, to the public, we created 2 infographics, both pictured here, one of which was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine and included in a recently published home-based cardiac rehab booklet. So this infographic, which is shown on the left, helps to easily communicate the recommended levels of weekly physical activity for good health and how to achieve those recommendations practically. The second infographic, pictured to the right, is designed to promote the 4 W's, reminding people not only to wash their hands, wear a mask, and watch their distance, but also to walk and be physically active during the pandemic. We also had a blog post published on a national science blog run by the American Physiological Society. We also spread our message through the virtual COVID-19 Town Hall series, which has been presented by the Health Research Institute here at Michigan Tech. And that was broadcasted via Facebook Live, Zoom, and also on local radio and television. Additionally, we've had 2 television slots, 2 radio interviews, and radio and television commercials used to promote our exercise program. Next slide, please. So far, we've delivered over 80 workouts with our community-based program, and soon, coming up on April 17th, we'll be reaching our 100th workout. The program's also been turned into a university-wide physical education course, which currently has 50 students enrolled. And last month, we were honored by the American College of Sports Medicine's Exercises Medicine on Campus program as one of 153 universities worldwide to receive a silver level designation for our efforts to create a culture of wellness on campus. With that, we also received a special honor for demonstrating creative physical activity adaptations during the pandemic. Next slide, please. We found that individuals taking the baseline survey reported pretty high levels of physical activity. So the average adult in the US achieves about 120 minutes of physical activity per week, and our sample reported an average of 512 minutes. So that's about 4 times higher than the national average. So it appears that the individuals that are filling out our survey and engaging with our program are already very active. With that said, they still reported that COVID-19 had negatively affected their physical activity levels, and it's possible that our program may be helping them to maintain those high levels of physical activity. Next slide, please. So currently, the COVID-19 pandemic is at the center of our attention when it comes to health concerns. However, it's important to realize that when the COVID-19 pandemic subsides, the physical inactivity pandemic will still remain a substantial health threat. And it's been pointed out by some authors and health officials as one of the biggest health concerns of the 21st century. You can go ahead and hit next. Taking this into consideration, it's critical that we have effective programs and infrastructure in place to promote and facilitate physical activity in the public, not just during COVID-19, but also indefinitely into the future. And this is especially true in rural communities, such as those in the Upper Peninsula, who have smaller healthcare systems and limited resources. And largely, promoting physical activity is a job that must be undertaken by professionals outside of the healthcare system who specialize in exercise and physical activity. Next slide, please.
Less than 1 minute left.
The biggest takeaway from our project so far is that our initiative and our plan has provided an effective way to deliver information and resources to the community and to promote and facilitate physical activity. What we've been able to do is lay the groundwork for a sustainable program that can continue to enhance public health, not only through COVID-19, but into the future. So our goal is to continue attempting to reach a broader audience, especially those who are less active. Currently, we're working to create workout DVDs that can be mailed to individuals who don't have internet access to join our program online. We also want to work toward establishing—
Sorry to cut you, Isaac, your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll request the judges to unmute themselves now and ask questions.
Hi, Isaac. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. I went first last time.
This is an amazing program. It's really cool, and your presentation was great. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more on what your thoughts are on that average activity level of like 8.5 hours. You know, that is just an insane number for an average. And what do you think in terms of what you can interpret from your surveys? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was surprising to see, and it wasn't what we hoped to see. We were hoping that we would get people filling out the baseline survey and they would be, hopefully below average, and then potentially, our program could help them be more active. I mean, I think with any kind of, exercise program, you offer fitness resources. The people that tend to go towards those things are people that are already active and pretty into like living an active lifestyle and exercising. So I think our program has appealed to those individuals. And, so that's it's shown us that we really need to do a better job of reaching the people who are less physically active and the people who need to increase their physical activity more. And that's why we really want to partner with, the local healthcare system and have clinicians actually refer patients, to our program. And then also, one thing I didn't get to mention at the end of the presentation is we'd like to make physical activity assessment a vital sign of health. So it's a part of every clinical examination. The clinician will ask, how physically active are you, and assess if they're sort of meeting the recommended levels, and then can refer out to our program.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yes, I agree. Great presentation. Just a couple of questions kind of related to that data set. Did you break it down by age and gender? And also kind of related to that is, with this population being self-selected, I'm just wondering if it really is a situation where people who already know the importance of physical activity and are already pretty active, say runners and skiers and people like that, were more inclined. Were you able to get any sort of sense of any of that hard data or even just the more qualitative data?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell exactly, but I mean, like I said before, and like you mentioned, it seems to be already really physically active people that are, engaging with taking the survey and also probably engaging with our program as well. But I think, it was sort of a letdown for us to see that data right away. And I mean, we haven't analyzed any post-survey data yet. We still have, I believe we have more baseline survey data coming in. So there's more data to look at. We're planning to get that number up from 43 to hopefully 100 or higher, so we have more people in the sample. But I mean, to us, it kind of showed us like, hey, the program's good, it's useful for people, but like I said, it's not reaching maybe the audience that we really need to reach and the people who need physical activity the most. So, I mean, it just suggests that it was valuable information because we need now to take our program and adapt it and somehow reach that population. So it is valuable information for us. Hopefully that answered your question. And I mean, we did have a really wide range of ages too. So, I mean, all the way from 18 up to 69-year-olds taking the baseline survey. And although the average was, really high for the amount of physical activity they reported, there was a lot of variability, and there were still a good number of individuals in there who were not reaching sort of the recommended levels of physical activity that they should be getting in per week, which is about 150 minutes.
Did you do a breakdown by gender?
No, we haven't really analyzed a lot of the data yet, simply because we're
Okay.
waiting for more samples to come in. We kind of just took a general look at it and tried to take away what we could, and this is what we have put together so far. So hopefully that's one thing down the road we'd like to look at is, we can look at age and how that may correlate with things, gender. We have measures like BMI that we've taken as well, and we have on the sample. So
Great, thank you.
you're welcome.
So that's 5 minutes of Q&A with the judges. I would now, while they are scoring the contestant, I would like to invite questions from the audience. You can either put it in the chat box or just unmute yourself and ask him.
Do I count as audience even though I'm presenting?
Sorry, Tim?
I said, do I count as audience even though I'm presenting?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Isaac, that was an awesome presentation. I just want you to know that I will be filling up, and I'm one of the people who you're wanting to fill it out. COVID has totally taken down my activity level. But my question for you is, how are you moving forward going to account for possibly people with disabilities, things like that, who might not be able to do traditional, methods of activity, but still are wanting to maintain the activity?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's been part of the challenge too with providing, our physical activity program that we do, is we have a broad audience of people that join our workouts. And so we have to try to cater those workouts to reach, a broad audience and show different variations of exercises, so people can kind of select the right difficulty level for them. So, I mean, within the workouts, we try to make it adaptable for everybody who's watching. But we also do the DVD version that we're working on right now that we can actually mail out to people who may have more disabilities or probably more elderly, don't have access to the internet. Those DVDs will be a little bit more catered towards that population. And I mean, it's really grown. We have a lot of students involved now. And I think we went from like 3 days a week of delivering workouts to now 6. So we've got more people involved. And I think, we may even open up specific workouts for people with limited mobility or some kind of disability, or for elderly. So it's branching out, and we're constantly trying to fill gaps and try to reach a broader audience. So that's how we hopefully plan to do that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. So if the judges are ready, we can move on to our next presenter for the session.
I'm ready, thank you.
Okay.
I'm ready as well, thanks.
Okay, let's move on. So I would like to introduce our next presenter. His name is Timothy Mays, and he is from the Social Sciences Department at Tech. The topic of his presentation is implication of waste streams at camp or train. Timothy, whenever you're ready, let me know and you can start with your presentation.
I'm ready. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Hi, everyone. So like Svarta said, the name of this topic, this is my thesis, is implications of waste streams at Camp All-Train. The goal of this research is to explore the site formation processes as they relate to a series of trash refuse deposits at Camp All-Train, a site located in the Hiawatha National Forest near Munising, Michigan. Camp All-Train was a civilian conservation corps camp used during the Great Depression and was later reused to house German prisoners of war during World War II. Both of these occupations were operated by the U.S. Army, an organization infamous for its emphasis on discipline, order, daily schedules, and hygiene. CCC enrollees were subject to a rigid schedule and were expected to maintain a high standard of hygiene, since for the Army, cleanliness was almost like a religion. Despite this emphasis on daily schedules and hygiene and order found in the historical literature regarding these camps, there's little specific information about the actual process of camp sanitation, particularly regarding refuse disposal. The goal of this thesis is to provide a detailed case study that provides specific information about the processes of camp refuse disposal. To do this, I will analyze the data from excavated archaeological features at Camp Altrain to assess the site formation processes that created them. Use this information to evaluate the waste streams resulting from refuse collected and moved across this functionally complex site, and use this information about the process by which refuse was handled to reflect on larger ideological aspects of military sanitation and hygiene at Camp Altrain. Slide. The origin of the CCC camps can be traced back to the Great Depression. In 1929, a severe global economic depression left the American worker with few options for employment. Many of them would leave their families in search of work as there was a surplus of labor. To combat this, in 1933, the Roosevelt administration implemented the New Deal. This policy created public works programs that would create various opportunities for work. Slide. One of these public programs was the Civilian Conservation Corps, which aimed to fling open the doors of opportunity for young men aged 18 to 25. The program was run by the Army and was subject to the same concept of order and regiment. Along with housing, education, and job training, the CCC also paid $30 a month, 25 of which would be sent back home to their families. The labor that these young men engaged in focused on conservation and forest management, which included the creation of floodplains, fire breaks, and various agricultural projects. Slide. Camp Altrain, it was used as a CCC camp between 1933 and 1942, and it's located, as I said before, in the Hiawatha National Forest in the Upper Peninsula. During the CC occupation, it had 200 enrollees. But as the United States entered World War II, defeated German battalions were captured and treated under the same, under certain conditions per the Geneva Convention. As there was now an immense shortage of labor due to so many men going to war, 400,000 German soldiers were sent back to the United States and put to work in the camps that were originally built for the CCC. At Camp Altrain, there were 227 prisoners, 2 officers, and 37 enlisted men, with German officers often being in charge of their own men. Despite being soldiers from an opposing army, captives often approved of their overall treatment and living conditions. Even their work conditions were desirable, as they were supplied with the same tools and equipment to perform their jobs as the non-POW workers were. These POWs were subject to the same ideas of order and sanitation as the CCC were. Slide. This map of Altrain shows the general layout of the camp. There are barracks, a mess hall, camp offices, camp storage, and a canteen, where enrollees could purchase various items such as toiletries, food, and other supplies. This map helps provide context for the positioning of refuse deposits around the camp. Not only that, but it also gives a really good type of idea of where some of the stuff was coming from. As I'll get into the presentation, I guess keep this map in mind. Because we have a barracks where people will have their personal items. We have a mess hall where people will have food and other items. We have a canteen where people will buy candy bars or beer or soda. So this map really provides really good context for that. Slide. This map is an aerial view of the camp currently, with the various depressions in the areas outside of the camp, as well as impressions of some structures and roads, as you can see in the map. There's lines that indicate the roads. The round spots located along the road, those are depressions from refuse deposits, most of which we've excavated, some of them, but all of which are recorded, GPS, all that. And we're in the process of putting all the information together now. Slide. Excavations at Camp Altrain were performed by archaeologists from MTU, including myself, and volunteers from the National Forest Service Past Burnt Time program. Over the course of a week, we excavated 7 archaeological features, yielding over 29,000 artifacts. These features were trash pits from both the CCC and POW occupations. Finding the mean date of the manufacturing of most artifacts allowed us to determine which occupation these features belong to. We would find stuff that has serial numbers on it. And so things like that, we'd be able to date it, or even, for glass bottles, for example, Owens, Illinois, which is a manufacturer in Illinois, They started using Duraglass in 1940. So if we find things that say Duraglass on it, we know that we can date this to 1940, and it would likely be POW occupation as opposed to, well, it could be CCC occupation, but obviously mixed with other things could tell us where it fit within that spectrum. Slide. As the best part of archaeology tends to be the artifacts, for people on the outside of archaeology. I decided to give some photos of the artifacts we found. Milk and food cans, as well as soda and beer bottle caps, make up much of the assemblages. That metal, I mean, we found so much of it. And it's milk cans, it's food cans, vegetables, things like that. We have also found toiletries such as dental cream tubes and hair oil bottles. It's really interesting when you find the advertisements for these things as well, which I don't have access to at the moment. I'm trying to get back to because they're old. I just also think that the toy truck is interesting and does not exactly fit into a context of a men's camp, but likely belonged to an individual enrollee that had a personal connection to it. So that's when you're able to move outside of the ideological concepts that they tried to create the CCC and POWs to be as men and all these things. And we start looking at more individual aspects of how people actually are. Slide, please. So the methods, during excavation, all of these features were excavated in arbitrary 10-centimeter levels, allowing us to control where the archaeological data is coming from. Each of the features will be examined independently to determine frequencies and percentages of the artifacts found in there, showing how often certain types of artifacts, such as toiletries, food-related items, etc., would show up in each level, and how much of these different types of artifacts make up the overall percentage of the full assemblage. So, we have 29,000 artifacts. We have X amount coming from one level, one feature, X amount coming from another feature, but trying to figure out how much within those features are toiletries, or how much within that feature comes from, tableware, plates and cups and things like that. Then the levels will be compared with the adjacent levels and other features to determine depositional episodes, which will allow for me to identify patterns in refuse disposal. Kind of what that means is understanding where the times, like if they would go from one place to another and then dump it, or if they would go to one place, dump it, go back to another place, dump it, and then cap the refuse deposit. Slide, please. This map shows which of the trash sites were located in relation to one another. This is pretty much the same map, but I labeled where some of the 5 of the features are that we excavated. The other 2 units are located closer to camp structures, like right outside the mess hall. So they don't really exactly fit into this map with, the depressions. Feature 30, 31, and 40 have been found to be POW occupation, while features 23 and 45 are found to be CCC occupation. And again, we found that by understanding the assemblages and dating the assemblages, some of the stuff that we're able to date. It's possible that feature 40 is actually a mixed occupation, because that's where the ash seem to be gathered. If when they clean out the stoves, they've had to take the ash somewhere, and there seems to be mainly concentrated in that area. So further excavations will help us answer that question. And as opposed to being a capped refuse deposit, feature 23 is more of a trash scatter. Most of the artifacts being found on the surface. When we did excavations, we didn't find that much actually in the ground, but things scattered all along and maybe within like the first 10 centimeters of the dirt. Once functional groups are made and the origin of refuse is determined, such as what comes from the mess hall, which comes from the barracks, I will be able to create waste streams, which would show the process in which refuse was collected and disposed of. Like I said, the way that it would move across camp. Slide. Archaeological data can serve as a cornerstone of historical analysis, providing hard evidence for claims made about history. It is easy to claim that the process of sanitation at these camps would be met with control, but archaeology acts as a means to prove it. Through some of the research already conducted, I believe I will find that the process of refuse disposal become more regimented over time, with the POW occupation following the rules more strictly as attitudes towards camp management changed over time. These trash deposits present a simple and everyday task that was expected to be performed by enrollees and prisoners alike, but also provides the context necessary to understand the larger aspects of control and sanitation at the functionally complex sites. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I would now like to ask judges to ask questions to Tim.
Yeah, great presentation, really interesting. I don't have any questions at this point. I love anything related to history, so really interesting background. Thank you.
Thank you.
What led you to want to explore this site in particular?
So before I actually came to Michigan Tech, my advisor and a couple of my people in my cohort, they, on like a whim, we work very closely with the Hiawatha National Forest and the head archaeologist there, Eric Drake, and he, they decided on a whim on some weekend in October to go out there back in 2018 or 19, no, 2018, and kind of, hey, this is a weird place, what are these trash, what are these, depressions? And so they opened up a couple small units, those ones that are by the barracks in this hall, and then pretty much decided to build a passport in time, a public archaeology program to go back and just what's going on here, because again, like I said, the biggest issue is in the literature. We don't see much about that. And also archaeologically, it's very, and not to give any guff to other archaeologists who've done CCC archaeology, but it's really shallow, both both metaphorically and actually quite literally shallow. They just kind of do surface excavations. So we're missing a lot of context about, we have these archaeological sites, these massive archaeological features, but we need to talk about how they were created, because that in itself is a historical and cultural activity, just as a celebration or a ritual would be.
Very interesting. Nice presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite questions from the general audience for them. Maybe I can ask one. I do not have a background for archaeological sites, so it might be a silly question, but in this site, when you represented the site locations, how do you identify these excavation sites?
So honestly, sometimes you just have to guess. Sometimes you have to do small surveys around it to figure out if you see, it's called a shovel test, where you just dig a 30 centimeter, 50 centimeter deep hole. And if you find a good amount of artifacts, you map out where you found the artifacts and you decide where to open up units. That's not the case here. Just walking, where this was at in Hiawatha, it's the North Country Trail cuts through it. And honestly, while walking along the North Country Trail, you see massive depressions on each side of it. And they could have been from any occupation. There was lumbering happening, things like that. So we dug into it, found out, no, this is CCC and POW occupation. And there'd be holes in the ground that are, 3 feet deep. So we got lucky on this. So instead of calling it a unit, it would be a feature, because we could see the feature just walking by it. If it was something we just opened up, it would be a unit, and anything we found inside of it that was different would be a feature. But these features were just there. And archaeology can be fun when it's, I don't want to say that easy, but when it's really apparent that there's something there, there's a change in the soil and things.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yeah, well, like even if you look in the, this is before we excavated. If you see all those holes, that's before we even excavated. Those are just there, you can see it even in the aerial views.
So just a follow-up question, do you date these artifacts using some chemical method, or is it just with the stickers or features on the artifacts that you found?
Yeah, so because this is historic archaeology, we don't really need to use the chemical carbon dating, which some people do with prehistoric artifacts that are 9,000 years old. But really what happens is we do association, like even with prehistoric artifacts. If I was down in Ohio last week doing some excavations, and we found a arrowhead, right? And by looking at the arrowhead, we can tell like the style of it is associated with mid-archaic, which is about 9,000 to 6,000 years old. And the kind of same thing goes for this when it looks like a certain type of bottle. If the bottle is made in a certain way, we know that technology changed over time. So if it was an older technology, we find the date where that technology changed, and we know that it's pre, 1940. Or if we find like I said, a serial number, and we see that something's patented in 1941 or 1942, we know that it was made in 1942 and after, and distributed in those years after, which would mean POW occupation. Whereas if we found something that wasn't made since 1940 and was popular in the 1930s, we could, oh, well, this would be CCC occupation.
Sure, thank you.
Mhm.
If there are no more questions from the audiences, I would like to ask the judges if they are done scoring. If yes,
Yep,
we
I'm all set. Thank you.
okay. So we can wrap up the session for today. Before we go out for the day, I would like to thank everyone for coming to the session. Be sure to attend the virtual award ceremony if you can. That is tomorrow evening from 5 to 7. There are other oral presentations happening this afternoon, and some are scheduled for tomorrow. So I would like to invite you to attend those as well. Thank you for coming in here and being part of Graduate Research Colloquium. You guys have a rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks all. Bye.